another question I have, which you showed these three techniques, these with three different weapons, wonderful. Can you also apply them to dagger?
Sure. So I have so you're talking about dagger alone, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is a parrying dagger. I don't have a rondelle dagger with me here at my home studio, but these were used on their own as weapons. These cruciform daggers, but also the knightly dagger was often a much stouter or thicker, even triangular blade, oriented towards just thrusting with the point through armor. And the weapon can be held forward. I think we talked about this last time, but Fiore makes a comment that this is the knightly way to hold a dagger. But within the rapier tradition as well, we see single dagger being used this way. And so there are two kind of different attitudes to how we might use a dagger. One of them is this a bit more Renaissance idea. And to me, it depends on the tactical nature of the situation. If I'm dealing in kind of a historical fighting situation, especially if I was going against a sword, and I had a dagger like this that gave me some protection around my hand. So even this simple guard gives me a little more cover than we would think with a modern knife, where you only have even that just small crossbar on some modern knives. And so I might use it very much like I would a rapier, in that I would actually hold here and I would control using those angles of cover against the weapon. And even if it was another dagger, and we see, interestingly enough, we see this in Bowie knife systems, which have this connection to a rapier and small sword, is this idea of as somebody thrusts in at you, you cross it over and then you seek to strike, perhaps checking the arm or hand, checking here, coming underneath. So I'm using similar ideas to what we were doing before. So in the true fight kind of setting, I might be drawing, controlling. And notice here, one thing I do quite a bit differently between the rapier, it has this hilt, and the knife, is with the dagger here, I'm more inclined to let myself draw in a little tighter. So I shorten the length of this lever. I'm not inclined to be out here as much. Although in the traditional Renaissance systems, they did fence out here more. There was a lot more fencing with the knife. I prefer, and I've got a little more modern that injects in here, I prefer to get into this closer place where I can start taking more control of the opponent. But still, this type of dagger can be very, very effective for controlling that space. This is against a longer knife. If I'm dealing with somebody who had a shorter modern knife, then I think just like anyone, I would take a more modern approach, meaning I would not want to enter my hands into that space until my opponent was absolutely committed. So I tend to keep a lot more distance in modern knives, even using a knife like this. If they're moving and slashing through this space with a short knife, I don't want to be introducing too many opportunities to strike into my hands. So I'm going to tend to play a little bit farther away, and I will still use this, if I can, to shut down against this cross. Now, Fiore had some interesting ideas for how he would apply these principles. And I would say this is how I would do this with a rondelle. And Fiore is the old master of the medieval tradition. He recommends holding your knife like this.
What?
So again, imagine that this is a stout, triangular or square rondelle blade. So this is much more like how I would choose to fight with a baton, or a stick, or a rolled up magazine if I wanted to feel all born identity on it. So he recommends holding it here, or even here in this crossed position. And so here I can do some interesting things for my defense in against another dagger. One is I can still use the point of the dagger. So one of the core defenses here is if my opponent is seeking to strike me this way, I might actually just choose to angle and stab them in the hand as they strike. So getting in, especially if we're thinking of armored fighting, one of the vulnerable targets is the palm of the hand, because your armor plates can't be in that position. So I can protect my hand by being closed in around the knife. And if somebody's striking over, it's actually quite difficult there's no way to really have this area be fully protected with your gauntlet. And so I'm seeking to strike in here in that gap between the knife and the hand. So this is one way I might defend. Then the other, again, in a more, especially whether it's against a sword or against somebody else with a knife, when they make a concerted attack, I'm going to seek to control it this way. And this looks very similar to what I was doing with the longsword. And of course, I might come in here to envelop the arm and then use the dagger more here. Or again, if the dagger's here, we might, one of the positions that Fiore really preferred is being like this. And I use this as well. And again, my goal here by being reverse weighted, so you can see I'm carrying my weight here, I can pull my body away if I need to, and I can also come forward very quickly. And so now I'm using the dagger in this reverse grip to carry across, point down, and then I can free it. I can also, I use this reverse grip too, and this is, if I had an edge knife too, I might use it to slice and then trap. Okay, or even, you know, here, if this, imagine this is an arm, I might slice and trap. Okay, so I'm very tight here. So I'm making, this can be a reinforced cover, then I can come into here to trap and control. So I come against an arm. If I'm against the dagger itself, then once I make this twist down, you're going to take the dagger from the grip as well. So again, it's useful when we think about that type of knife system. It's much easier for modern people to think of it more like how I would defend myself against a knife, a long knife, if I had a stick. You know, it's better to think of this knife as this metal parrying tool with a sharp point than to think of it like a modern, sharp tactical knife. So, you know, this is a very different game with tactical knives.
Different. Many thanks. And another question I have, because this question I wanted to ask you, did they use any leg tripping in Rapier Fight or kicks in Rapier Fight back then in Europe to the legs?
So there are, within the tradition, and we certainly in our school, and that could be possible. I think if my students got that close to each other, something had gone catastrophically wrong. I think of how long those weapons are. But interestingly enough, some ideas where that shows up is one, after you've struck someone. So for example, Salvator Fabris, he had a manual he published in 1606. He says in one of his techniques, after you have run somebody through with the dagger, so you've done this big pass like this, hit them in the chest, he says, continue through, place the hilt against the chest, and then stand to throw them. So the weapon is, you know, through their body, and then you're throwing them using the hilt of the rapier and stepping behind. So doing essentially like a back heel throw with this weapon planted in their chest. Thibault, who is a Flemish fencing master from, his book got published in the 1640s. He shows a technique. He says, if somebody gets too close to you, then place your foot on their chest so that you can haul your weapon back to put it in front of them. So he's actually using a chest kick, like a front kick, to actually hold an opponent back while also withdrawing the weapon to bring it online. So using the length of the leg to bring the weapon to bear. And so there's instances of that within the tradition. Certainly in my school, where the Duello Armazzare system is universal across these weapons and wrestling. If you get close to somebody, then you're using the weapon. You know, you might very well be half sorting your rapier or entering in this way and then conducting a single leg takedown. Or, you know, if you ended up in that spot, there's nothing that says you couldn't. But again, think about how the rapier postures are often in this kind of way. Now, if the person is here, that things change, but you also know from wrestling, when somebody's got this long base and their weight is strongly here, it's again harder. You'd need to get them taken back before you could be making that attack on that front leg. And you certainly couldn't be making a double leg takedown. So that changes some of those ideas.
Very good. Thank you very much. And so did I understand you correctly, in your system, in all these things you showed as well, sidestepping is also a key to understand you correctly?
So we often teach, initially we teach people about the straight line. So the line between me and you, we call the line of direction. So that's the shortest path of travel between us. Then the line that the weapon travels, we call the line of offense, or the line of attack. We need to recognize they're slightly different, because I could be attacking from different angles, even while I'm traveling along the line of direction. But any attack that is not directly over the line of direction is necessarily going to be shortened. Right? So if I'm not on the straight line, all of these attacks can't reach as far because I'm taking a longer route to get there. Now, it's useful and important to understand how to control this space, because it is the most direct. And so an opponent will often be considering, and I need to be aware that the shortest attack they're going to make could be this direct one. So I can't ever ignore it. So that's why we often spend a lot of time learning about this with all the weapons. But then very quickly, especially with longsword and side sword, we start looking at what it means, particularly to the relationship between the weapons when we move offline or crossline. And so we think about how by stepping away, both in the defense and attack, I can create stronger angles over the opponent's weapon while still being threatening. So think in a straight line parry, if I'm here, I essentially have to point a little bit off target from you. But if I defend that line by stepping over here, I can actually keep my point directly on line with you while still having this advantageous angle over your sword. And we also use that same idea. You may have seen when I did the counter cut with the longsword. We use that same idea when I move into the opponent's weapon. So you can see here, by stepping, not just going direct, you can see I haven't deflected the opponent's weapon very much. If I actually step to here, I create a much greater angle. I actually force the opponent to a weaker angle by stepping across the line of direction.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty essential part to when you really get into the system, you're not just a beginner. This type of movement is important. And when we're defending, I think about there always being three core principles in defense, and they are distance, so being out of the measure of that attack, cover, having your weapon at superior geometry, but the third, of course, is angle. And angle has a couple ideas. One is it can mean stepping under the angle of a blow. So if somebody's attacking me here, I might be stepping here so the weapon is passing me. But it also can mean placing myself in an angle that puts my center line, my structural strength, and aligns it towards their attack. So I'm never, one thing I think in weapons arts, I really think that I want to recognize, I want to always be maximizing my leverage advantage. And one of the ways that I do that is I aim my center at the weapon. And that way my strength is here. I can never forget the opponent, but if I'm trying to kind of fight directly this way, we're kind of equal. And I never want to be in an equal situation with an opponent. I always want to be incredibly superior to them.
Excellent. Excellent.
So that's a way we use changes of line.
Very good point. Thank you very much. Just one more question. Would you prefer to be offline or crossline? You personally?
I think that I from a tactical perspective, so we're thinking, if we're really thinking about like whether I'm moving into the weapon or away from it, I like moving into a weapon. If I have the time, moving into a weapon, so I gave that instance here of that being crossline. If I'm moving into the weapon, I like how this shortens, it weakens the opponent because it breaks their angle, breaks their center. And it also gives me a real proximity, a real sense of where their weapon is, and it cuts down where they can go next, and I'm really close to it. Moving this way is often easier because if I'm coming forward, there's always this risk, coming towards the weapon, I'm not well positioned, then I'm going to end up having to get out of that situation in some way. So this always gives you more time, but it also there's more freedom in it. So the opponent actually has a little bit more time to recover themselves. And I have a little less sense of where they are because I'm not less likely to get contact. And there's more time for them to generate some momentum to get to other targets than me. So this really closes the opponent out. And I think of that even in close fighting situations. Often I'd much rather come across my opponent's line so that I'm breaking their structure than to step around them. I find that I prefer that.
Excellent points. Another question I have, can you use these, again, back to these three, because I'm really fascinated what you explained. Can you apply them to empty-handed fights as well?
Absolutely, yeah. So those, I use those same ideas. So if you think of those three defensive principles, certainly in an empty-handed kind of fight, I'm keeping distance. So I want to make sure that I'm managing distance, but I also might be managing, if this is their punching, I might be managing distance and controlling. So here I'm just doing like an inside cover. This is posta lunga, okay? And this, has the sense of inside blocks in a lot of different systems, but I'm using the same ideas for how I might enter. In the Italian system, we strike with hammer fists quite a bit. So they're called masalata as one of the names of them. And part of that is because, especially against people who might be armored as well, as you know, striking this way against hard targets is super dangerous for the hands. And so there's a lot more striking this way and striking this way. And so we use the same ideas here. And so I'm using angle. So I often in unarmed, in the boxing, especially in earnest fighting, there's all of the ideas are still applicable there, in that against a committed straight punch, I might strike my own punch over the line of their arm. So I'm here just saying it on a punch, but an open hand strike. If I'm defended against here, so that I strike straight and they seek to make some sort of block or cover action, I can actually do the same thing here of entering. I can enter this way and hit with the hammer strike. And just think about how that was the same. This is a thrust. I'm yielding. This is a cut. Okay, but it's a cut. And then I'm entering again, and I'm using these same ideas. So there's a whole system of striking with thrusts and strikes of the fists that really parallels the weapon art. And you know, you've done even more sort of anthropological research across different martial arts, but one thing I've really seen is it seems to me that most unarmed arts, from a traditional sense, tend to derive from the armed art as opposed to the other way around. And it makes good sense in that, of course, if you're really fighting for your life, you're not going to go out there with your fists. You're going to use a weapon. Fighting with your fists is the desperation situation. And so what have you been training into your body? You're training this weapon art. So the weapon art is going to be what's expressing itself in the unarmed art. And that's very true within the Italian tradition as well.
No, absolutely.
It speaks a lot to how strong the social aspect of humans is. And, you know, you think of, when I was thinking, you know, the monkey dance, meaning mammals, when mammals are typically like two males, you know, whether they're goats or apes, when they fight, there's a way of fighting each other that is different than how they fight their prey. And this is true of us humans, and it's very interesting to think of that even in a conflict for true supremacy, again, it's a conflict for supremacy, not to kill the other person necessarily. And so there's that social component is there. And that there's also a social pressure, I think, you know, like I talked about the Italians in the dueling ground, that if you won the duel in a way that was socially unacceptable, you might as well have lost the duel, because you'll be more dead in your society than you would have been had you actually died. And you're also thinking about your legacy, how people see you if you die. It's just as important in the afterlife that you die in the right way, right? And so if you have all of this social pressure around you, that even if I die, I want to make sure I die right. You know, even if I win, I've got to win right. That's all there culturally, and we're all carrying this cultural legacy behind us. And so then, you know, I could see that this idea of the Mongols not having that same cultural legacy, their legacy being, no, my enemy is my prey, and I'm fighting them like game. This is not the Mongolian wrestling match in between our tribes. This is a totally different affair. And so I'm not worrying about how, you know, all I care about how I look is that I'm successful in hunting the game. Boy, I'll look like a fool if I don't kill off a certain number of the bad guys.
Yeah.
So, you know, just it's interesting how that, you know, their social reward structure must have been very different than the social reward structure within the Persian and European armies that they fought. There's just a different social legacy there.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, as you mentioned, that this is also very important in the historical arts we study, to look at this legacy, as you said, that, because then we start to understand why they fought that way and not the way we thought they should have, or why they were successful. Because often we always think about the weapons, better armor, but this is kiddies talk, right? Now, when I was interviewing our colleagues in Mexico, the whole thing was in Spanish, and then they started, and obviously I'm very interested in Mesoamericans and Aztecs, and then they showed me Aztec armor, which was made of different layers of cotton. And back then, I said, what, they had it? Yeah. And because I do lots of cuts, right? And I cut with katana, really good katana.
Sure, yeah.
With shamshir, which are good cutters. And I know as a test cutter, you cannot cut such a thing so easily. Because, you know, come on, right? You don't need to have an armor. And then because back then you read the history books, because Spanish came and they could cut and they had no chance. What did they cut? You understand, you know, because they were not naked, not all of them at least. All those guys with rank had that armor. And when I saw, and they had their academics, they showed me the armor they replicated. And the first thing I said to my team, guys, you could cut it. And I have good katanas. You cannot cut it, even those katanas. No way you can cut, right, like that. You cannot cut. So you need to go again for the opening or find something, you know. Because back then, before I saw that, I thought, okay, they didn't have good armor, and then you could have just, you know how the way I thought. And the Spaniards had steel, which you still read in many history books. But then also when you see their weapons, we all know that. So it's not only the superior, superior, or the weapons were superior. There are different factors in warfare, and one of them, as you said, social cohesion, how people followed certain rules. And it's very interesting to watch these things and to study these things.
Yeah, and so, I think just like how economics had this period of time where it was everybody, imagine this perfectly rational human making these perfectly rational buying decisions. And now it's been, socioeconomics has kind of shown, no, people actually act irrationally all the time. And I think that's the thing, we can make that same kind of choose to approach martial arts environment as somehow scientific, that as you said, this technology beats that one, this technique beats that technique, that it's all just about what was better. And so, given the right environment, everybody would have produced the exact same martial arts. But the reality is that the social part of it is probably a significantly larger influence on that than any of those rational components are. And so I think, whenever we dig into the traditional martial arts, if we're not also studying the social side of it, we're missing at least 50% of the puzzle.
Yes, absolutely. And at the end, I would like again to thank you. You have a very, very efficient way of teaching, because then this, what you just taught, these 3 ways you can apply to different weapons. And that's marvelous. And also to empty-handed and to dagger, right? So it's very beautiful. So you basically go, I know there are 3 types you taught. So your idea of principles, and these principles then are applied to different weapon sets or empty-handed.
Yes.
I understand it correctly.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Yeah, and so, we teach, as in anything, there's this interplay between technique and principle. I'm teaching you technique as a way of being exemplar so you can understand those principles. But my goal with technique is to convey principles into your body so that a highly proficient practitioner, a master of something, is the person who is actually able to express techniques from principles. So that's the progression that I want to bring my students through. And I'm a very systematic person, but of course, system is a teaching tool, and it's the goal is to bring it into your body. And then you want to be expressing that system intuitively.
Okay, very good. Devon, thank you very much. This was, wonderful explanation of techniques. And it was so lovely. I had the feeling I was holding the sword right now.
Yeah, I love this is a great model, and all my online teaching we use that. I put the sword right there so people can really feel like, okay, that's me with the sword there, and so it makes that so much more effective to understand that when we can. It's a kind of a perspective that it's a very unique perspective for online training, which I love.
Yeah, I have never seen that before. That's why I was really fascinated. So it was marvelous, really good. Thank you very much. Would you like to share something with our viewers and say something to them?
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly, if people want to investigate and learn more about European martial arts, especially the Duello Armbrustare tradition, as I teach it, come to my website, which is Duello, DUELLO.tv is the best one for finding me around the world. And I've got full video courses and everything there, as well as an online learning platform where you can get access to instructors directly, and you can do that on your own or with a partner. There's actually a tremendous amount that we can do over distance now, more than I ever imagined would be possible. And I'm really excited about, anybody's excited about this art, I want to get it out there into more minds.
Thank you very much. As usual, I'm going to share all these links to Devon, so you guys can go there. Thanks a lot, Devon, for being here again. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.